At 19, she was married off, still innocent, to a poor farmer. What he did on their wedding night shocked all. Winter had settled hard over Dust Hollow, turning the outskirts of town into a wasteland of wind and frost. At the edge of it stood a leaning cabin, its roof patched with scrap tin, its chimney coughing out the last of the firewood. Inside, Evelyn Hart moved like a ghost, quiet, efficient, unnoticed. She was 19, with hands calloused from chopping wood and fingers stained with soot. Her mother had died when she was a girl, and since then, the only family she had left was Merritt Hart, her uncle in name, but never in kindness. A drunkard with a mean streak, Merritt spent his days at the bottom of a bottle and his nights cursing the cold and Evelyn alike. She kept the place running, cooked, cleaned, mended, hauled water from the half-frozen creek while he slept through mornings. But nothing she did earned thanks, only more shouting when the stew was thin or the fire burned too low. That morning, as the wind howled against the walls, Evelyn was mending a tear in her only winter shawl when a knock came at the door. She heard Merritt grumble, then shuffle to open it. A moment later, a deep voice answered. "I came to speak about the loan, Mr. Hart. I figured we could settle things civilly." Evelyn's fingers froze mid-stitch. The man at the door was Jesse Callahan. Once, not long ago, he'd owned the largest ranch outside Dust Hollow. He had cattle, hands, and a wife who laughed like springtime. Then came the sickness, the blizzards, the ruined harvests. His wife died, his fortune followed. Now he was a widowed farmer with 2 children and a house barely standing, but honor still held him upright. He stood now with snow on his shoulders, hat in hand, looking nothing like the man Merritt once borrowed from. "I'm not here to take your house," Jesse said calmly, "but I'll ask for something fair. Timber, labor, or a strip of land if that's all you've got." Merritt scoffed, bottle already in hand. "Land? I got nothing but trouble and a mouth to feed that ain't mine." With a cruel laugh, he yanked Evelyn forward from the corner of the room where she had been pretending not to exist. "Here," he slurred, "take her. 19, still pure, never kissed a man. Make her your wife, and we'll call it square." Jesse blinked, stunned. "What the hell are you saying?" "She's mine to give. She eats my food, lives in my house. You want something of value? Take her." Evelyn didn't speak. Her breath caught in her chest like a trap snapping shut. Jesse stepped back. "I'm not here for this," he said firmly. "I don't take people. I came to speak man to man." But then he looked at her. Really looked. Her hands were raw with cold, skin split and bleeding. A bruise yellowed beneath her sleeve. Her eyes held no fight, only a hollow stillness, as if whatever dreams she'd had were long buried under survival. And still, when she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "If this is the only way I get out of here, I'll go." A silence stretched between them. Then, Jesse nodded once. "I will take her," he said quietly, "but I won't touch her. Not unless she asks." Merritt laughed. "Suit yourself, cowboy." He didn't know, or care, that he'd just given away the only person who ever lit a fire in his empty life. Jesse helped Evelyn onto his horse. She sat behind him, hands trembling, not from cold, but from the weight of something shifting. As they rode away, the wind swept through the valley. Neither of them spoke. But for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel like she was walking into another cage. She was riding towards something else. She just didn't know what. She didn't know what hurt more, being bartered like a mule, or feeling grateful to the man who took her as if she was something worth saving. The Callahan farm sat on the edge of the valley, where the trees gave way to wind and silence. It was a house built by hands that had known loss, small, lean, with shingles that rattled when the gusts came down from the mountains, snow piled on the windowsills like sleep that never melted. Evelyn stepped off the wagon and into her new life with stiff fingers and quiet steps. Inside, the house smelled of smoke and earth. There were 3 wooden chairs around a rough-hewn table. A tin kettle on the stove hissed, half full. The roof leaked into a tin bucket. The bed in the corner was barely wide enough for one, and the fire in the hearth crackled as if holding on out of pity. Two small faces peeked from behind a hanging quilt. "That's Caleb," Jessie said, pointing to the older boy, "and Ruthie, she is 4. Caleb's eyes were sharp, suspicious. Ruthie clung to the fabric and blinked like a fawn in tall grass. Evelyn nodded, heart thudding. "Hello." No answer. That night, Jessie made them supper, if it could be called that. Watery porridge, no salt. Evelyn offered to help, but burned her hand on the kettle and dropped a spoon. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Later, alone in her corner room, she sat on the edge of the straw-stuffed mattress, unrolling her sleeves to see her palms, cracked from washing, fingertips raw. A knock on the door startled her. It was Jesse. He did not look her in the eye. He held out a small jar, half-used, with waxy yellow salve inside. "Bear fat, it helps." "Thank you," she whispered. He left without another word. In the mornings, Evelyn rose before dawn. She tried to wash vegetables in the water bucket, only to find the top layer frozen. Her hands bled from scrubbing. The broom splintered. She oversalted the stew. Ruthie cried at the table, wanting her mother. Caleb crossed his arms, eyes full of silent judgment. One afternoon, Jessie handed her a hatchet. "I will show you how to split kindling. You will not last long here without knowing." Evelyn looked at her blistered palms. "I suppose soft hands do not belong out here." "They belong," he said, "but they do not last." So she learned, slowly, stubbornly. They boiled wild mint for tea. Jessie showed her how to use 2 fingers and a thumb to start a fire faster. He taught her the rhythm of the axe, the trick to catching falling snow in a tin cup for cleaner water. She tried to joke, one evening, after Ruthie had fallen asleep with her thumb in her mouth. "I thought I was marrying a man. Turns out, I got 2 grumpy children with it." Jessie smirked. "You got the better end of the deal. Children do not talk back as much." Caleb, from the corner, muttered, "I heard that." Then came the night she burned the cornbread. It had started as a simple supper. Evelyn wanted to surprise them. She found cornmeal, lard, and a pinch of dried sage in the cupboard. She stirred, poured, baked, but the fire was too hot. The bread blackened within minutes. When she opened the oven door, smoke gushed out like a beast. It filled the cabin, making Jessie drop his cup, and Ruthie burst into tears. "Open the window," Jessie shouted, coughing. Evelyn flung it open, gasping, fanning the air with her apron. Caleb ran for the door and flung it wide. "We are gonna die from poisoned bread," he yelled. That did it. Evelyn dropped to her knees and laughed, loud, sharp, free. The kind of laugh that caught in her chest and shook loose something heavy. Tears came with it, hot and sudden. It was the first time she had laughed since her mother died. Jessie watched her, a hint of warmth behind his tired eyes. "Next time," he said, helping her to her feet, "just warn us before you try to kill us with dinner." Evelyn sniffed, still grinning. "Deal." The days grew colder, but the house began to warm in quiet ways. Evelyn discovered the recipe by accident. She was searching through the back cupboard for cornmeal when she found a folded scrap of parchment behind a rusted tin. The handwriting was delicate, almost hesitant. A list of ingredients: flour, molasses, dried apples, a note in the margin: "Add cinnamon if it has been a hard day." She held it gently, as though it might crumble. It was a recipe for apple brown bread, the kind Ruthie had once mentioned in her sleep. Evelyn made it the next day. She burned the first loaf, but tried again. By sunset, the scent filled the house, warm, spiced, like memory. Ruthie came into the kitchen, barefoot and blinking. "Mama used to make that." Evelyn knelt beside her. "Would you like to help me next time?" Ruthie nodded solemnly. That night, for the first time, she climbed into Evelyn's lap while the fire popped and crackled. At bedtime, she brought her little wooden comb and said, "Sit, I want to fix your hair." Evelyn sat on the bed's edge, apron still on, as Ruthie gently parted her hair and began to braid. Her fingers were small but careful, like she remembered watching her mother do it. The braid was crooked and loose, but Evelyn wore it to bed. Jesse said nothing when he noticed, but that night Evelyn found a new wooden peg installed beside her wash basin, just the right height for a towel. The next morning, a second one appeared, lower, for Ruthie. It wasn't grand, but it was something. Later that week, Evelyn stepped outside after cleaning the stovepipe and saw him, Jesse, sitting on the front step, back hunched, hands busy with yarn. He was mending a tiny slipper, Ruthie's wool bootie. His fingers moved with care, slower than they once did. As he worked, he whispered to himself, she's gone, but the kids still need warm feet. Keep going, keep moving." Evelyn froze. She watched him through the drifting snow. He looked older in that moment, smaller somehow. Not the man who had stood so solid in the saloon weeks ago, but someone trying not to fall apart. She didn't speak, just turned back inside. That night, after the children had gone to bed, she placed a tin mug of warm milk on the step beside him. Beside it, a torn scrap of paper. 4 words, written in neat slanted script. "You are not alone." He didn't reply. But when she woke the next morning, the mug was washed, dried, and sitting on her shelf. Little things kept changing. Caleb began speaking to her, short phrases, mostly about chores, but no longer with that wall in his voice. He let her help feed the chickens. Once, when she spilled a pail of water, he rolled his eyes and handed her a rag without a word. Progress. Then, one quiet evening, she returned from collecting firewood to find something on her pillow. A smooth green stone, the kind found only by the creek, where the sun hit the water just right. She turned to see Caleb pretending to read at the table. "Thank you," she said. He didn't look up. "It's just a rock." But she kept it. Every night, Jesse still kept to himself. He slept on a cot near the hearth. His door never opened past the crack, needed to nod good night. He never touched her, never crossed the line they both had drawn. And yet, somehow, each day folded them closer. In the way he poured her tea without asking, in the way she mended the fraying collar of his shirt without a word. They never spoke of affection, but they were building something, not with declarations, but with small acts and silence. It was the kind of love that crept in through cracks, like firelight through a cabin wall. The first real snowstorm of the season rolled down the valley like a pale curtain. It muted the world outside the cabin, turning fields and fences into one unbroken sheet of white. Inside, Evelyn stirred a pot of stew while the children played with scraps of yarn. Jesse had gone into town at dawn to trade eggs for salt and nails. By evening, the storm had thickened. Evelyn set the table, glancing at the door. When it finally opened, Jesse stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots, hat rimmed with frost. He was not alone. A man followed him in, tall, loud, with a red scarf and the easy swagger of someone who belonged in saloons. Eli Turner, Jesse's oldest friend from the lumber camp, smelled of whiskey and wind. "Well, you did it, Jesse," Eli grinned. "Took yourself a young wife, did you? Smart man, house looks better already." Jesse set the basket down, jaw tightening. "Eli, watch your mouth." Eli smirked. "Come on. We all know why a man takes a girl like that out here. Cold nights, empty bed." "That is enough," Jesse snapped. Evelyn froze by the stove, ladle hovering. She wanted to disappear, but her feet felt nailed down. Eli chuckled. "No shame in it. Hell, if I had the chance?" "I did not marry her for that," Jesse said sharply, voice low but heavy. "I took her because she had nowhere else to go, out of pity, not love." Silence, only the fire popped. Evelyn's heart stumbled, out of pity, not love. The words rang like a bell. She set the ladle down, quiet and careful. She could not breathe, could not look at him. She excused herself, in a whisper the men did not hear, and went to her room. Her hands shook as she folded her few clothes into the burlap sack. She laid Ruthie's little wool shoes on the pillow and smoothed them with her palm. By the time the stew was ready, Evelyn was gone. Ruthie woke at midnight, coughing from the dry air, calling for Mama Evelyn in a hoarse voice. When she saw the bed empty, she wailed. Caleb tried to soothe her, but her crying turned frantic, breaking into sobs. Jesse came in from the barn, wiping his hands. "What is it?" "She is gone," Caleb said. "Her bag, it's gone. Ruthie cannot stop crying." Jesse felt the blood drain from his face. He crossed the room in 2 strides and opened her door. Empty. The bare fat jar still on the shelf, the towel on the peg, and on the bed, the shoes. He picked them up slowly, as if they were fragile. His throat ached. Ruthie's sobs turned to hiccups. She reached for him. "Papa, find her, please." "I will," he said, voice cracking. "I will bring her back." He knelt, pulled on his boots, grabbed his coat and shoved his hat on. Caleb stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. "Stay with your sister," Jesse said. "Do not let the fire die." "But Pa—" "Stay." He stepped into the storm. Snow swallowed his footprints in seconds. The wind bit through his coat. He mounted the mare bareback, too desperate for a saddle. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was walking into the white, alone, carrying her hurt like a wound. Jesse's jaw clenched. He pressed his heels to the mare's flanks. The storm rose around him. Sky and earth blurred into one merciless gray. The snow came down like a punishment from heaven. Jesse's horse fought the wind with every step, nostrils flaring, hooves sinking into the white. Visibility had vanished. The world was a swirling blur of gray and silence. He rode with only instinct and memory to guide him, scanning the tree line, the hills, the old paths no one walked anymore. Then, just as he rounded the bend near the edge of Weller's Bluff, he saw it, a sagging, weather-beaten cabin half buried in snow, an abandoned trapper's hut, long since left to rot. Smoke did not rise from the chimney. The door hung crooked. He jumped from the horse before it fully stopped and yanked the door open. She was there, curled on the floor beneath a moth-eaten blanket, her back to the wall. Snow clung to her skirt, her boots soaked through. Her lips were blue, her eyes barely opened. "Evelyn!" He dropped to his knees, shaking snow from his shoulders, heart in his throat. She blinked slowly, confusion and recognition fighting behind her gaze. You came?" "Of course I came." He shrugged out of his coat, wrapped it around her shaking frame. "God help me, Evelyn, I did not mean it. You were never a pity." Her teeth chattered too hard to speak. Jesse pulled her closer to the fireless hearth and cradled her against him, pressing her frozen fingers between his palms. Her body trembled against his chest like a wounded bird. "I am sorry," he whispered, forehead to hers. "I do not know how to say things right. Never have." She did not answer, just clutched the coat tighter. He cleared his throat, voice thick. "I wake up every morning and think about whether you have eaten. I check the kettle to see if you made tea. I watch the light in your room and wonder if you slept at all." He swallowed. "I never think about myself anymore. Not since you came." Her breath hitched. "And I know I never touched you because I promised I would not, but I think about your hands when they braid Ruthie's hair. I think about how you hum when you cook, even when it is just potatoes." She began to cry, quietly at first, then harder, her face pressed into his shoulder. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you so good to me?" He exhaled, a long, ragged sound. "Because," he said, his voice low, trembling, "you are the first person who ever stayed, after seeing that I have nothing to give." She buried her face against him, sobbing in the quiet dark of the abandoned cabin, and Jesse held her, as if by holding her, he could keep the hurt from returning. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, for the first time, they let the silence speak. And in that silence, something broken began to mend. The snow began to melt in patches along the southern ridge, revealing the cracked earth beneath. It was not yet spring, not truly, but the wind had softened, and the sky no longer looked like stone. Days passed since Jesse had found Evelyn in that lonely cabin. She no longer slept with her coat clutched around her. She braided Ruthie's hair again. Caleb sat beside her at breakfast, pretending not to smile when she passed him the honey. Still, something lingered between her and Jessie, something fragile, waiting for the right moment to bloom. One morning, just after dawn, Jessie saddled the mare without saying why. Evelyn, still tying her apron, looked at him curiously. "Come with me," he said, "just for a little ride." She hesitated. "The stew." "We'll wait." So she climbed up behind him, arms hesitantly around his waist, the smell of leather and pine in her nose. They rode in silence, up through the thinning trees, to a narrow clearing halfway up Beartooth Ridge. The air there was cooler, thinner. The ground sloped gently toward a patch of flat soil ringed by stones. Evelyn's breath caught. Lavender. Dozens of small, struggling stalks, still green despite the frost. Some bent sideways, some rising proud. The scent was faint, but it was there, fresh, earthy, unexpected in this wild place. Jessie dismounted and offered his hand. She took it and stepped into the clearing, boots crunching on frozen needles. "I planted them after she died," he said softly, gazing at the rose. "From the seeds she left in a drawer, said she always meant to start a garden." Evelyn knelt beside one of the plants, fingertips brushing the soft gray-green leaves. "You kept them alive all this time?" "I try," he said. "Some years they make it, some they don't." She looked up at him. "You never told me about this." "Some things are easier to show." Jessie reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded square of fabric. It was worn at the edges, faded from sun and time, but the embroidery was still clear, a single pink rose, stitched with care. "This was the first gift my mother ever gave to my wife," he said. "She was not easy to please, my mother, but she liked that girl from the moment they met." He held it out to Evelyn. "She would have liked you too." Evelyn blinked hard. I cannot take this. It belonged to her." He shook his head. "No, it belonged to Hope. I have not felt that in a long time." She took the handkerchief with trembling hands, cradling it like something sacred. "I am not trying to replace her," she whispered. Jessie looked at her then, fully, eyes steady and warm. "I do not want her replaced. What I want is to feel alive again." He stepped closer, his voice low, careful. "You do not fill her space, you carved a new one, and I am grateful for both." Evelyn felt tears rise, but they did not fall. Not this time. She reached for his hand, rough and calloused, warm in hers. "I used to be afraid of the night," she murmured, "the silence, the cold, the dark." Jessie's brow furrowed gently. "And now?" She looked around, at the lavender, the sky, the man before her. "Now I have a fire," she said softly. "Here, with you." And in the hush of that high mountain clearing, where flowers dared to grow despite the cold, something rooted itself between them, not a promise, not yet, but the first true leaf of love. It was a clear morning after a storm. The snow had mostly melted, and the earth beneath was soft and slick with thaw. Evelyn had just finished mending Ruthie's mittens when she noticed Caleb was missing. "Where's your brother?" she asked. Ruthie shrugged. "He said he was going to find the perfect stick." "For what?" "To make a bow, a real one, not the baby kind." Evelyn's stomach tightened. She stepped outside, scanning the woods beyond the barn. The sky was pale blue, the air still, too still. She called his name once, twice. No answer. Her boots sank into wet mud as she ran toward the grove behind the field. That was where Caleb always went hunting for treasures, old nails, bones, good branches. Then she heard it. "Help!" A faint cry, muffled. Her heart stuttered. She sprinted toward the sound, nearly slipping in the slush. When she reached the old well behind the oak tree, her breath stopped. Caleb's voice echoed up from the bottom. "Ma, I fell. I can't. My leg hurts." "Hold on! I'm here!" she shouted, heart pounding. She dropped to her knees and peered down into the well. It was shallow, maybe 15 feet, but the walls were jagged and damp. Caleb was huddled at the bottom, his face streaked with dirt and tears, one ankle twisted at an odd angle. Jesse came running a moment later, eyes wide, his breath sharp. What happened? He's down there. He was trying to find wood for a bow, Evelyn gasped. We need a rope. Jesse was already moving, grabbing a coil of it from the side of the barn. He tied it to the nearest tree, tested the strength, and without another word, he slid down into the well. The descent was rough, scraping his palms and boots against the stone. Evelyn leaned over the edge, voice shaking. Are you down? I'm here, Jesse called from below. He's banged up but alive. We're coming up. Get ready. She braced herself, wrapping the rope around her arms as Jesse began tying it under Caleb's arms. The boy whimpered, teeth chattering. Ready, Jesse shouted. Evelyn pulled. The rope burned her palms raw, the strain shooting up her shoulders. Inch by inch, Caleb rose into view, dirt smudged across his cheeks, eyes wide with fear. You're okay, she whispered, tears streaking her face as she hauled him out and into her arms. You're okay, baby. But Jesse had not followed. She turned back toward the well. Jesse? There was a grunt from below. I slipped. My ankle's gone bad. I can't climb out. Then hold tight, she said, wiping her face. I'll pull you up too. Evelyn, no, your arms. Don't argue with me, she snapped. She looped the rope again, this time lower, braced her feet, and began to pull. Her muscles screamed. The rope tore at the skin on her palms. Her shoulder jerked painfully with each tug, and something popped, a sickening sound. But she kept pulling, because he was hers now. All of them were. When Jesse finally emerged over the edge of the well, gasping, dragging his bruised leg behind him, Evelyn collapsed beside him, her breath ragged, arms shaking, one shoulder already swelling. Caleb rushed into her arms, clutching her around the neck. Mama, he sobbed, don't ever leave me again, ever. She held him close, wincing from the pain, but tighter still. Jesse crawled toward them, his eyes dark with worry. He took Evelyn's bleeding hands gently, looked at the torn skin, the dislocated shoulder. You pulled me up with that? He whispered. She nodded, too tired to speak. He cradled her hand against his chest and pressed his forehead to hers. My boy is safe because of you, he said, voice thick. We're all still breathing because of you. Evelyn smiled weakly, tears sliding down her cheeks. You're not alone anymore, Jesse. He pulled both her and Caleb into his arms, holding them like they were everything. Because they were. Summer came late to Dust Hollow that year, but when it arrived, it draped the valley in color. The lavender patch on Beartooth Ridge, once pale and struggling, now bloomed wild and thick, humming with bees and sunlight. That was where Evelyn chose to marry Jesse Callahan. There was no church, no preacher in robes, no piano. Only the scent of earth and bloom, and the love that had survived frost, silence, and flame. The guests were few. Caleb, in his only button-up shirt, standing proud. Ruthie, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers, hair braided by Evelyn's hands. And Mr. Lyle, the blacksmith, who had known Jesse since boyhood and could bless a union. Evelyn wore a simple cream dress, stitched by her own needle. Her hair was pulled back with a ribbon. Ruthie insisted on tying. Jesse had no ring. But when asked what he had to offer, he reached into his coat and pulled out a sprig of dried lavender, bound with red thread. This, he said, looking into Evelyn's eyes, is from the first plant that survived. He tied the stem gently around her wrist. It is not gold, he said softly, but it is everything I have and everything I mean. Evelyn's lips trembled. Then it is more than enough. They said their vows with wind in their hair and dirt beneath their boots. No one clapped. But Caleb wiped his eyes when he thought no one saw, and Ruthie hugged Evelyn's legs so tight she nearly fell. As they began the walk down the ridge, a figure appeared at the tree line, thin, hunched, unsteady. Merritt. Hart. He looked older, frailer. The swagger was gone. He removed his hat and stood silently. I heard about today, he said. I thought, Maybe you'd let me watch." Jesse stepped forward, but Evelyn placed a hand on his arm. She walked alone toward her uncle. The wind tugged at her dress. "I'm sorry," Merritt said, voice rough. "I was drunk. I was stupid. I thought I owned you. I didn't. I see that now." She studied him. "I forgive you, but you don't get to come in. You stood outside my life too long." He nodded. She turned and walked back to the family she chose, the life she built, not from escape, but from courage. Autumn came fast. On the first night of winter, Evelyn stood by the fire, hand resting on her belly, the curve just beginning to show. Jesse came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and leaned his cheek to hers. "You are glowing," he murmured. "It might just be sweat," she laughed. "No," he said, voice low. "It's something else." She turned in his arms. "Tell me," she whispered. He kissed her brow. "You are not just my wife. You are the one who saved my soul." They stepped outside. The world was hushed with snow. The children ran after them, scarves flapping. Caleb carried a shovel. Ruthie held a tiny white fir sapling Evelyn had picked weeks ago. Together, they dug a hole beneath the lavender ridge. Evelyn laid the sapling into the earth. Jesse covered it gently with soil. Caleb poured water from a tin cup. Ruthie pressed a smooth stone beside the roots. "What do we name it?" Ruthie asked. Evelyn looked up. Snowflakes landed on her lashes. "Hope," she said, "because if snow still falls, love still grows." Jesse nodded, pulling her close as the snow began to dance. And beneath that wide white sky, their love stood rooted, quiet, stubborn, and alive. And so, under the weight of snow and silence, something bloomed that even time could not bury, not pity, not convenience, but a love forged in hardship, held together by lavender, laughter, and second chances. Evelyn was never meant to be someone's debt. She became someone's dawn. And Jesse, the quiet farmer who thought he'd buried all hope with his first love, learned that sometimes the heart can bloom twice. If this story stirred something in you, a tear, a sigh, or a warm ache in your chest, hit that like button and subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of passion, sacrifice, and redemption in the rugged frontier. Because, out here, where bullets missed, hearts didn't.